Hi everyone, welcome to Johnny How To. In this video, we're going to take a look at the Primatte keyer inside of Nuke, but just keep in mind the Primatte keyer is inside of other programs. I believe it's in Blackmagic Fusion. It's a paid keyer that you can add into After Effects, so very popular, very user intuitive and easy to use. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about it. So first off, I'm going to select in my node graph, go and press tab and type Primatte, and it's not Primate, it is Primatte. Go and press enter and add that in. And the first thing to mention is, unlike Keylight and some other keyers, the Primatte node is not limited to just keying a blue screen or a green screen or green or blue. It can actually do any color. So for instance, if I wanted to, in the case of this office, try and take out the chairs and the tabletop, again, not actually remove them from the scene, but make them see-through, I can go ahead and plug in my foreground input, which is what you want to extract something from. I'll press 1 on the Primatte node. And in the Primatte node itself, there is a number of operations you can do from this drop down here, and you pretty much go in order, and I usually only use these first 3 or 4, but Smart Select Background Color is the first one, and the color picker is already selected for you, so you don't have to click on that. And we're just going to go ahead and control click on the color we want to try and key out. So if I control left click on the tabletop, you can see, well, it kind of turned black, but if I press A for alpha, that means it's actually trying to make that invisible. So remember, in the world of alpha channels, white is visible, black is invisible, and shades of gray are partially see-through. So I've started to make that see-through. I press A to go back to my color. If I want to do that with the chairs that are this color, I control left click, since my Smart Select Background Color is still selected. Now that's starting to become invisible. So to continue to refine that, basically use the next one down in the list, which is Clean Background Noise, which you can just use the drop down, or you can use your arrow keys just to proceed down the list. So under Clean Background Noise, I'll go and control left click, and you see I'm slowly adding my selection. I can control left click and drag to do that more quickly, or I can hold down control and shift and left click and drag, and it'll add everything inside of the square that I add. So very quickly you can make selections with the Primatte node. And again, this works the same in any particular program you might be using it inside of. So I'm not going to spend too much time in this comp right here, since obviously this is not my intent, but if I wanted to see the clouds right here through the table and the chairs, I can plug that as my background, go in and view the result, and here we go, we're seeing that through there. So the takeaway from this really silly first example is that the Primatte node is not limited to green or blue. All right, so let's go and take a look at a little bit more of a real example. And I may come back to this example here to talk about spill and trying to get rid of spill, but I feel like that might be in a separate video. But just to point out, for any blue screen or green screen, you can kind of see for this particular girl, there is blue spill from the screen on the side of her face, and especially when you get down to the inside of her arm, and then also on her red shirt, you can kind of see that spill that's on there. The Primatte node can handle that built into the node, though it typically doesn't do quite as good of a job as, say, something like Keylight, and then also there's nodes outside of the actual keyers inside of Nuke to do a good job as well. So for now, let's go ahead and focus on this girl right here, which we're going to try and put inside of this scene right here in the office. And just to mention, so this footage is from the old, very old Apple Shake tutorial media. And so credit to the people who initially provided this footage. All right, so for the woman, let's go ahead and add the Primatte node. So I'll select her and then press tab and start to type the word Primatte and press enter. And let's do an initial selection on screen. So Smart Select Background Colors, automatically select them and hold down control and left click somewhere kind of in the middle of the region. So first off, before I do that, you can see that the lighting on the screen varies quite a bit. We have seams, we have it lit more brightly down here, we have it lit more darkly over here. So there's quite a variation. It was lit well, but there's quite a variation in the screen and the ground and everything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and control left click just kind of in the middle ground to see what I get as a starting point. And just on your blank monitor, I'll press spacebar to go full screen and F to fit, maybe plus to zoom in a little bit. Doesn't look too bad, but if I press A for alpha, you can see, okay, there's still a lot of this blue screen left over, especially over here in the corners where it's a different luminance and different value. And then obviously this part of the screen is lit way differently than down here. So if I control left click down here, that starts to get there, but then this is really bright. If I click up here, this starts to work, but then this is getting brighter. So it's kind of a battle. And the problem that you don't want to do is you don't want to just say, okay, well, I got my initial color. I'm just going to go ahead and do clean background noise and control left click and make all this black. You can, and that's what the clean background noise is for, so you can selectively add more to your selection. But what happens when you do this is you end up making the pixels, let's just say I did this for the entire image. And you think, well, there we go, boom, all done. The problem is, and let me go ahead and merge her over the background. I'm just going to use this background input temporarily. It starts to make very aliased, crispy edges. So you can kind of see the stair stepping you have here where the pixels are. This is not because I'm zoomed in very far. You can see these are nice and clean. It's because we've pushed the pixels so far to try and get rid of everything everywhere that it started to eat into the transparency of her natural edges. So if you look at original footage, you can see it's nice and soft, but then in our composite, it looks like you literally took like a pair of scissors, cut her image out and put her on another background. And of course we have the spill that's here as well. So let's go ahead and try and do this a little bit more cleanly, though again, since this is the very first introduction to Primatte that you're having here, I'm going to go ahead and try and still keep it fairly simple. So I'm going to go and plug in the foreground input of our newly recreated Primatte node. I'm going to go ahead and try and select something kind of close middle ground here. So Control F click, I want to get close, but not so close that I'm actually on any of her pixels, even if they're blurring out. And to get rid of all the rest of this gunk, I'm going to go ahead and do a garbage matte. So if you haven't seen the key light video, garbage matte is saying, all this out here is garbage. I'm never going to have to worry about it, so I'm going to get rid of it. And by the way, this is just a still image, so it's not like I have to animate it over time. So first off, the resolution here is 720 by 486. So I'm going to go and press, click down here in the node graph, press S for settings. I'm going to set up my project settings for 720 by 46, which is in TSC right here. I'm going to go ahead and press O for roto. And the reason I changed my project settings is now when I do that, my roto shape is going to default to that size. So I'm going to press spacebar while hovering over the viewer so I can get more screen real estate here. I'm just going to quickly, but somewhat closely, go around the section that the woman is occupying. And I don't want to get like right here and do this all perfectly, because now I'm just doing articulate roto, and that defeats the whole purpose of shooting against a blue screen. So just roughly following the contours and the general shape, you're kind of going to end up with a blob a little bit. But we're just wanting to get a decent key for her area. And if we were doing this on an animated shot, how do you know how close or how far your garbage matte should be? Well, if you have a shot and you're spending more than 10 or 15 minutes animating it, which we're obviously not having to do here, this is probably way more points than I needed, to be honest, then you know you're being a little bit too picky. But all right, so with that done, I'll press F to fit that. I have to do H to fill. I'm going to go ahead and cut out and get rid of all the rest of this. So the Primatte node, unlike the key light node, does not have a garbage matte input or a outer matte input. So after the Primatte node, I'm going to type in, I'm going to press tab and type in, and that's in merges. Basically, I'm going to say A, which is our Primatte, is kept inside of B, which is our roto shape. So if I plug this in and view it, we've gotten rid of all that extra gunk that was out here, and now we can just focus in and hone in on the areas around her in the actual comp. Now again, just to mention, if I was really doing this shot, I would do different keys for different sections, for the upper part of the screen, the lower part of the screen, etc., and so on and so forth. But just for an introduction, I'm going to try and do it in one key. So I'm going to go and view my end node while I'm double clicked on my Primatte node so I can see what I don't have to worry about, all this out here. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to try and refine this. So I already did my smart select background color, but I'm going to try it again. So smart select background color, control left click, see if I can find a good kind of middle ground. That doesn't look too shabby. I mean, it looks like a decent starting point. Oh, and so I'm not actually selecting my roto shape. I'll go ahead and flip up the triangle there to get rid of its on-screen controls. And so if I go ahead and move around here, that doesn't look too bad. It's working good for the top part of her, not so much for the bottom on the blue screen, but we'll work with that as our starting point. So all our smart select background color is our starting point. We're dropped down to clean background noise. And now let's go ahead and say, okay, we started to get rid of this. Let's control left click and start to add values. I'm going to hold control left click and drag. And as I do that, I'm adding more and more to say, I want this to be the background. I don't want it to show up. Okay, so that's starting to come along. Again, I want to make sure not to choose pixels that are actually part of our imagery, hair or otherwise. And I'll go ahead and work my way down. And so you can see that, especially if I pump up the luminance, we're not doing too bad up here. There's still some noise left over, but viewing it regularly, that's mostly gone. And by the way, to reset that, you just click on the red Y for luminance, and that'll reset it to 1. But down here, there's still some left. And honestly, I hate to do this because it's just not a professional way of doing things. But for an introduction, let's go ahead and just try and get this area to black. So with my clean background noise still selected, I'm going to control left click and drag and just add more to that selection. And we won't worry about this little bit right here. We're going to leave that because we'll probably want that shadow anyway. All right, so we pump this up. There's a little bit of noise left over, not much. I don't think we're going to see that on the background. If we zoom in, we can see that a little bit. We can always clean that up more if we want. And then the other thing we need to do is if we darken down the luminance, do we have any black holes or anything left over inside of her imagery, which we don't. We usually do. If we did, like say there was a black line on our arm or anything like that, we would go ahead and say clean foreground noise, say we need this to be white, control left click on that, and that would bring that back. But in this case, we actually didn't run into that, so good. All right, so I'm going to reset my luminance slider, and let's go ahead and put her on her intended background. So let's go ahead and say here's our original footage, here's our Primatte where we're cutting her out, here's our end node where we're getting rid of all this rest. So if you see, without the end node and this roto shape they're using as a garbage mat, we have all this still left over that would show up against the background. So let's just do that as an example. So with my Primatte node right here, I'm going to click out and not have anything selected. I'll press M for merge. I'm going to say I want this, my A input above, and I want this below the office. And so that's a B input. View it. And if I go out of my alpha view, you can see we're still seeing the blue screen against the background here, which we obviously don't want. But I'll go and delete that. If we use our end node, which remember is getting rid of all this extra gunk by way of the roto shape, if we go ahead and select our end node, press M for merge, so it's automatically connected to our A input. We plug our B input into the background and view that result. We can see that we're getting her fairly cleanly composited against the background. I'll go spacebar to go full screen, F to fit, maybe plus to zoom in a little bit more. And this doesn't look too bad. Now she lost her shadow. She's pulling Peter Pan syndrome. She has no shadow on the ground. And the main thing that we're noticing now, or at least I'm noticing, is she has this blue spill from the background still remaining. And her pixels, you're seeing a little bit of that aliasing because we pulled it and pushed it all in one key. But overall, if you look here, I'm at 400% zoom in right now. So if I go back to 100%, which is the actual pixel ratio of the imagery, that looks pretty clean. Not too bad, aside from shadow and then the blue spill. So let's try and address the blue spill a little bit. And I'm not going to spend too much time on that because that could be a whole other video. Let's go ahead and see what we can do and if we can get this in here just a little bit more cleanly. And then mainly from there, we're going to go ahead and just try and get a little bit of that shadow back and call it a day. Again, I don't want this to run too long since this is just an introduction to Primatte. All right, so let's go ahead and just try and get rid of the blue spill. And one way you can do that inside of the Primatte node is if we drop down a little bit, there is a spill sponge. And the spill sponge is saying, okay, I want to sponge out or kind of sap up a little bit of a particular color in a particular area. So we can definitely notice it on her hair. We can definitely notice it on the bottom of her dress, which was actually see-through to the stage a little bit. And then also we have on her shirt, it's showing up a little bit as well, though it's not quite as visible. So let's go ahead and see if we can address the dress a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down Control with the spill sponge selected. I'm just going to left click and drag. And you can see that actually sapped out that color and made it see-through because it actually was see-through to begin with. And that doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's probably way more see-through than it was intended to be. But that's kind of working a little bit better. So let's go ahead and look at the original. We can see it is see-through to the blue screen beneath. And is that about the same? So I'll go ahead and select this, press 1. I'll go ahead and select our comp and press 2. And I can toggle back and forth and see that, yeah, you know what? That's actually not too far off. And it did a good job of also getting rid of the blue spill on her shirt. But we still have some left over on the hair. And I really don't like how alias this is, but again, that would be something that we'd address with multiple keys. Ironically, it doesn't look too bad on the skirt, but it does look bad, her top on the shirt. So anyway, let's go and try and get rid of a little bit in the hair, though I might use some different methods of color spill suppression if I don't like how this looks. So let's go ahead and try spill sponge just a little bit more, and let's go ahead and just do a single Control F click on her hair. You see that actually helped quite a bit. Let's try and find another area that has some spill showing up. Control F click. And we'll see if that slowly starts to make a difference. And again, I'm trying to do just little bits at a time because I don't want it to overcorrect, because if it overcorrects like that, you get some really funky stuff. Now she looks like she's dying from the plague or something. So I'll go ahead and try and back that up a little bit. And you know what? That's actually already made a big difference. I still have spill sponge selected. I'll try one more click on the hair. I'm not sure if that might have been too much at that end, so I'll Control Z that. But there we go. So with only using the Primatte node, I would usually use other nodes as well to try and kind of refine this. But only using the Primatte node, we've kind of gotten rid of a lot of that spill. And our composite, while a little bit crispy along the shirt, the top, doesn't look half bad for only doing one key and doing that really quickly. Now the shoes, on the other hand, are a little bit funky. And if we go ahead and view our Primatte node and press A for alpha and darken down our viewer, the reason this is happening is because, here we go. So now we do have these things. So I'm viewing the Primatte node is because we have areas here that are transparent. And again, these are kind of hard to tell unless you have the viewer adjusted. But so we have some transparency in the hair. We have some transparency in her shoes. So we want to fix that. So in the Primatte node, let's go ahead and do clean foreground noise, meaning we want to bring this back to visibility. Let's go ahead and grab some of this. Let's go ahead and grab these shoes. I'll just do Control F click, Control F click. And by the way, if it's ever like a really reflective shoe or some surface and it's reflecting blue, that might get rid of too much. So you don't want that to happen. So this looks really bad right now, but when I go and uncheck this Y slider right here and go ahead and go back to our view of our comp, let's see how that looks when it's all composited together. So I'll press A to go back to my color view. It doesn't look too bad. I'm gonna have to go revisit my spill because that changed once I adjusted the key. But we can kind of see we have her shoes not see-through anymore, which is kind of the goal here. And you would just have to kind of go back and forth. I don't want this video to stretch on anymore. You have to go back and forth with the spill sponge and the other methods to make sure that the comp looks nice and clean. Again, this is not the ideal way to do it as far as if you were really trying to do this, but as a basic introduction to Primatte, this works pretty well. I'll cover the shadow, adding in the shadow in a separate video, just because I'm gonna use a process separate from Primatte, and I'll also do separate videos just for spill suppression since there's so many different methods that you use on a case-by-case basis. But at least as a very introduction to Primatte, hopefully you can see this as somewhat helpful. Remember, this is not just a Nuke thing, this is in Fusion. You can get it as an add-on for After Effects, so it's a really flexible, really user-intuitive keyer, and hopefully you'll find it to be really, really useful as you start to master it more and more. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next Johnny How To.